Hi. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about trance states. Sounds a bit technical, but really, the other day I was driving to Aberdeen and I was coming up with a load of ideas about how I could connect with people for my book launch, which is something I often do. I actually really like driving. And the reason I like driving is because my subconscious is distracted by all the technicalities and things I need to do to drive, keeping an eye on my speed, watching out for other road users, all the normal stuff with driving. And when that happens, my mind's free to think about creative ideas, um, things I want to do, all sorts of stuff floods in. It's the same with running, actually. I'm a rubbish runner, really, but when I'm running, there is so much effort needed to focus on not running too fast, not getting out of breath, all that sort of stuff, that actually it totally frees up my mind to think about all the things I need to do. The difference between running and driving is when I have a good idea when I'm driving, there's nothing I can do to take a note of the idea. I have to just keep it in my head, and that can cause a bit of a problem because what happens is the ideas build up and build up and build up, and I can end up very distracted. Not necessarily a good thing when you're driving. And that's what happened the other day. Is I was driving along and I put my car on cruise control so I don't go over the speed limit. And on the way to Aberdeen, there's a number of speed cameras, so it kind of makes sense to do that. You can't be alert all the time. And there's a part of Aberdeen where the speed drops by about 20 miles an hour because there's a junction. And normally you stop the car, you slow down well in time and everything's good, put the cruise control on to get through that particular speed limit, and then return to normal afterwards. But this time my head was so full of ideas that it was only just as I was passing the speed camera that I realised I was in that speed drop area, and I'd been ticking along on cruise control on the other speed all along. Luckily, I don't think the speed camera flashed, but that's a trance state. We used to call it daydreaming and all that sort of stuff, but actually the reality is that we're all in that state for at least 90% of the day. Some people say it's 95% of the day, and I find that a little bit hard to deal with because it means that only 5% of the time am I actually in control of myself. And in that state, your subconscious is keeping you going. Now, we all know that the subconscious does a load of stuff internally in our body. It keeps your heart pumping, keeps your lungs going up and down, fights off any viruses that come in. All that stuff that happens automatically is governed by your subconscious. But in that 90%, is also your subconscious trying to keep you safe and well from stuff that's external to you, stuff that's outside of you that might be causing you some sort of threat. The tricky thing about that is there are very clear rules, very scientific rules for how it can keep you safe inside your body, but not quite so clearly defined rules about how it keeps you safe outside of your body. But essentially, the response that it does internally is the same as external. It triggers a physical and emotional response to keep you safe from a perceived threat. And this is why, when something happens and you find yourself losing control, it's because your subconscious has taken you into a protective state. And in that trance state that you're in, your thinking brain gets switched off because it kind of gets in the way. You don't need to think to be able to survive, funnily enough. You need to just be able to react really quickly. So think about a spider. The number one phobia in the UK is spiders. But there's no venomous spiders in the UK. There's no biting spiders in the UK. And yet it's still the number one phobia. Which means that we are all either scared of spiders or know somebody who's scared of spiders. And if you think about those people who are scared of spiders, when a spider comes into the room, they stop being the person you know. They stop being in control and rational. And they go into a fight, flight, freeze response. I have to say that really slowly because they're really hard words to say together. Now, in fairness, I don't know anybody who goes into a fight response with a spider. Most people go into a freeze or a flight response. And anybody who's not scared of the spider looks at them and goes, what's your problem? You know, it's tiny, you can stand on it, you can stick it in a glass, throw it outside, you can do anything to it. But the person who is scared has been hijacked by their subconscious. It has perceived a threat, taken them into a protective state. And in that protective state, it will do whatever is necessary to help them survive, which is usually to run away or freeze in this situation. When the spider leaves the room, the person gets their thinking brain back. That precious 10% that's left, they get that back. And then all the judgment comes in. Why couldn't I just? Why didn't I? What's wrong with me? Oh, I'm really stupid. What a crazy thing to be scared of something so little. Because now you can think, you can rationalize your way through something. But this is the problem in life, is if you have something that your subconscious perceives as a threat, it switches off your thinking brain and it takes over and it will do whatever's necessary to protect you. This is why you find yourself so often saying, I should be able to do this, I can't, it sounds stupid, I'm crazy, and you kind of judge yourself and are really hard on yourself. But the reality is, you don't have that cognitive function when you're under threat. So over the next couple of days, I'll explain to you what sort of rules your brain is using to decide whether something's a threat or not, so it can trigger that response. But the first thing to remember is, if you find yourself in an emotional, physical response, call it anxiety, call it panic, call it just feeling rubbish, call it whatever you want to, it's not your fault. You lose